welcome to another episode of Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
I am Larry.
Jesi. And Sara.
And I'm Josh, and today we are going to be going over a work of Polish poetry by Julia Hartwig. The poem is called What Can They? And I am really interested to see how everybody saw it and approached it. The discussion starter I have for this poem is, what do you feel this poem has to say about humanity and their place within nature as a whole?
That's an interesting question. What does it have to say about humanity?
And their place within nature.
Yeah. I don't know. That's a tough question, huh? I think it's, it seems to be about kind of like tyranny or like the oppressed versus the oppressor kind of thing. That's what I got out of it.
And strip it down as naturalism because I think it has to do with basic, not just the interrogator on the interrogated, but what humans have asserted their dominance over. And not just the leader to the ordinary citizen, but also the human to animals, plants, other living beings, which either include those that have become resources or are resources.
I don't know. I kind of took it a little bit. I guess differently. I took it more as trying to see, how, in a way, like, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. Do you mean like almost more literally? Yeah, like I guess that's a better way of saying it. I mean, I looked at it as like comparing similar things, but seeing the differences between them. Because when they were talking about how like the water isn't the same as the creek, or it doesn't move the same as the creek, and how the first line, how the interrogator is related to the interrogated. They're essentially going after something that's the same thing but from different.
The interrogator and the interrogated are the same. They're from the same clay.
Yeah, but two different sides.
But they've formed to take two different sides, and then one happens to have been able to develop as the interrogator, and the other one is still in a position where they're interrogated, which it's much more challenging because they're two, they're human subjects per se. The more basic is the knife to the animal's flesh, but it all depends on whether or not the knife is the individual object or being controlled by a human force.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely kind of makes a difference in that point. And, she doesn't really say either, which it is. But, I mean, even looking at that, the animals surviving off the land and, what are we other than animals? I mean, yes, we're intelligent animals, but, we still have to survive. So,
yes,
yeah.
We do have to. That's the whole point of the argument that's made is that life, with most species, life is about survival. It becomes a very sketchy blur for humanity because of all of the goals that they place upon themselves. But as far as the basic instinct is the fact that they will do what they can to survive and make sure that those that they love or consider family are able to survive as well, and that the person that's being the controller, which is the interrogator per se, the controller is going to assert their dominance upon a particular being, but that particular being is not going. The communication at hand comes in the fact that that the controlled or the interrogated isn't going to communicate in the way that, okay, you're approaching me with a knife. I'm just going to stand here, and you're going to, and you can stab it through my heart and kill me. That maybe in Titus Andronicus, but not in this. Most of them, they're going to do what they can to either get away or do what they can to survive.
And
Well, to me, it's about the language, right? It's about like the first notes are the interrogator, the interrogated, and I think the last 3 or 4 lines are all about dialogue.
Yeah.
Right? So I mean, I think that's the general point that the poem's trying to make is that there is really no communication between the powerful and the weak.
But it's not a matter of an issue of communication. It's the issue that they don't want there to be a sense of communication, especially if the controlling force is in a good position. The third and fourth line are probably the most essential lines of the poem. That language is mountains away, and there is no fool who would set out to look for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote that down too. That the way I saw it was, you have 2 separate sides of the spectrum, and nobody's willing to go and see that. And again, I'm looking from how I understood, which was like the difference in similar things. Nobody's really willing to go and see that you're basically, I guess, in the sense of the interrogator and the interrogated, you're fighting over kind of the same thing.
yeah,
It's a complete story of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
Because
It
the
is.
following line,
you don't want to see
the
the
next
other side.
a few lines down, the liar's tongue turns round like a rotten mill wheel.
And
Which,
the,
Yeah,
That was a very colorful line.
To me, it's very much about the oppressor and the oppressed. I just think it's like, it's basically saying that whatever group is that is powerful cannot communicate to the group. I don't think that it's possible. I think that's what they're saying, is that communication is impossible.
and in nature, during this era, humanity is the controlling force. That's like the shoe in the crushed weed.
Well, I take all that as metaphor. That's just that the shoe is the oppressor, the weed is the oppressed, the lion is the oppressor, the prey is the oppressed.
You can see it as both metaphorical and naturalistic, though, too.
Well, shoes don't actually talk to grass, right? I mean, that's not something actually.
No, that's not. It's metaphorical. There's the person that's wearing the shoe and is crushing the weed is an
That's
actuality.
I think with the first line of the poem, I automatically pictured it as being more literal, and then reading the rest of it reading the rest of the lines as metaphors.
Yeah, I think.
And I think like the whole purpose of an interrogator is to get information out of the other person, and the other person just wants to be free, whether they've done something wrong or not. And they will never really meet on the same page. They want 2 separate things, and they will say whatever they have to say to get what they need out of the conversation.
Was there anything else anybody wanted to add?
Do we know anything about this poet's life or anything?
Wasn't she recent? Didn't she recently die?
She died
I read
last year.
Yeah, in Google it was like, yeah.
She did live a good life. It was last year. I thought it was late last year. Otherwise,
Well, I mean, she's from Poland then?
yeah, she is from Poland, which that in itself, if you stayed in Poland, there was you went through World War II under Nazi control based off the invasion.
Yeah, that's
So
why I bring it up.
Yeah.
Was she there?
That would kind of go along with.
That would seem to.
There's a biography in the back of the book. Julia Hartwig is, besides Wisława Szymborska, the most outstanding woman poet in Poland today. This was written back in 1991. Since her first collection in 1956, she has published several books of poems, biographies of Apollinaire and Gerard de Nerval, and numerous translations of French and American poetry, in particular selections of Marianne Moore and Robert Bloch. Her latest collection, Relations, as it's translated into English, published in 1987, was critically acclaimed. So this talks a bit more about her professional background.
It's interesting because it kind of rings of like that the postmodern thing, right? Which basically says that communication is not possible between groups, and it seems to be the theme that I'm picking up.
I think it's postmodern, but it also uses naturalistic undertones too.
I think a lot of people, when they read something, they want to take a side. All right, like the interrogator is the good side, and the other guy's the bad side. And I think she wants you to try and understand the emotional reasoning of both sides by giving you access to like both parties.
I think she wants to do that, but I look at it very naturalistically, and I very much see the I very much see the acclamations about how humanity is suffocating every other living being around it, and how we do live in a world where humanity is not the only importance to many, and to what it's become, it is. But there are there's animals, trees, plants.
I mean, you're not wrong. I don't think people realize or understand the importance of the environment. And, you know, I mean, just to kind of bring up, aren't they saying like bees are close to endangered, you know, animals, marine life are swallowing and dying from plastic, which is terrible. But it's like, if those things go extinct, do they not realize that that's on, like, we don't survive very well if those things go extinct. So I would definitely agree with you about that, and maybe she's trying to, you know, express that a little bit in her poem too, by also kind of going back to what Larry said. Maybe it's kind of like a two meaning, you know, we are the oppressors for nature.
But she uses imagery by taking the human away from
The situation.
interrogating objects, because it would be very clunky if she made mention to a human behind the rifle or the shoe. So I would think that that's a strategy.
I agree, it's a strategy, but I just think it's getting at something completely different.
So.
But it's hard to tell without context. So
I was gonna say, don't you love how like poems you can have like two totally different like opinions on it?
That was like a really
both make sense. So.
And you didn't say what do you feel is the What do you feel is the metaphor with the shoe?
The shoe is the oppressor,
But
and it's crushing the grass, right?
who's the weed? Who's the Who is the shoe and who is the weed then?
Well, it depends on the social dynamic.
Okay, so
Right.
you see this as more of a political commentary. Okay.
And I think in a way when he brought up too, like if she had grown up in Nazi Poland, in a way that also kind of fits, because the Nazis were the shoe and they were the grass. So I think that makes sense too, and that's why I kind of like this poem, how we're having like two totally different
And
perspectives
granted,
like coming at it.
as much as in Nazi Germany, as much as their main target, or one of their key targets, was the Jewish population, there were a lot of Polish people that were killed
Sure.
during the war.
Yeah, I mean, it was basically any dissident would end up in the camps eventually.
Yeah, anybody that was non-Aryan to Hitler standards.
Yeah.
So, do we have any final thoughts? Yeah.
I'm good, yeah.
I think the last thing I wanted to bring up had to do with the water, because I approached it. I had to read it a few times before I got a complete the argument that I was going to present today. But it's interesting that water always remains inconsistent, regardless, because you have these you have the animal and the animal's flesh going caving into the knife. You have the weed being crushed by the shoe, but water, it's not going to. Rain is probably the best example. You're not going to do anything to stop rain from falling down. You can spoil water with chemicals and oils and all the other pollution that they place in it, in the oceans, but there's always going to be opportunities for water to in order to reappear. So it was interesting how the line about the
I was gonna say it doesn't match the creek. I'm trying to remember how exactly the line went.
and the water won't sing in chorus with its creek. So it's not going to, the chorus is probably, I see it as what humanity expects. And the fact that water's going to do what the water wants to do. The water's not going to, it's not going to rain when we want it to rain. If you want to really get technical, because we want a white Christmas doesn't mean that we're going to have precipitation on that day, on December 25th exactly. So, if you're interested in checking out Julia Hartwig and some of her poetry and poetry from other Polish poets, here is the collection, Polish Poetry, which was edited and translated by Stanislav Baranczak and Clara Kavanaugh, with a foreword by Helen Venler. There is poetry by Wisława Szymborska, Czesław Miłosz, Zbigniew Herbert, Adam Zagajewski, and plenty of other renowned poets. Perfect. Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Gladiators. For now, keep reading.